I am Charles Mingus, half black man, yellow man, half yellow, not even yellow, not even white enough to pass for nothing but black, not too light enough to be called white. I play that I am a Negro. I am Charles Mingus. To me, I am nothing.
He was my friend, my brother, my father.
He got these people around him that were incredible, really. I mean, all the great band leaders are like that.
He was so dynamic and so powerful and made such demands on himself and on everyone around him, musically, that it was just like a gigantic sea sweeping everything around him into this swirling music.
There's a certain point where the communication goes beyond words and you need that sort of magic to happen.
Mingus and a lot of the jazz people were very well aware of what they were of the fact that they were changing the harmonic landscape, that they were, great American innovators, and they also were acutely aware of their sort of debased position in society.
He knew one absolute truth, that the only absolute thing there is change.
I've come to New York to record a song for the Charles Mingus tribute album. I sort of volunteered myself. I had an obsession with this one particular Mingus piece called Weird Nightmare.
I think Weird Nightmare is a good song to record with this approach of different musicians, because it's almost as if it could be a song in the form that I first heard it in, which is the one from Mingus Revisited. The song is kind of like a soundtrack. I would have a strong feeling that the music was sonically affected by living in this city. I would think it would almost be impossible to be a writer and not be affected by New York. When I was first writing rock and roll music 12 years ago, and I still had a day job, I used to write a lot of songs on the Tube in London, because it was really good for that, Now, if you were sitting in an apartment with all of these damn noises going on, the sirens, and it's such a very noisy city, it couldn't help but be influential. People might be guarding his memory with maybe misguided intentions. I mean, I'm talking about the jazz world. It's generally kind of impenetrable. There's a sort of, this is our, we may have nothing, but it's our nothing. And it's understandable given what you describe as the boutique jazz, whereas people sort of like get the look right and forget the soul, I'd understand why people are defensive about it, but I don't think that it once again comes down to the fact that you're dealing with a composer rather than, even though he used elements of, obviously large elements of alchemy and improvisation, you are dealing with a composer's work, I would imagine that Mingus would probably, to some extent, if he were here, be kind of like dismissive of what would be, musically ill-educated people tampering with his music. But that goes on all the time. Composers are always like that. Cole Porter told off Frank Sinatra singing the wrong words, I mean, as far as I can tell, the music stands outside of time. most of his best music at least stands completely outside of time. That it doesn't. I don't think of it like jazz or anything. I think that's why it's an ideal. He's an ideal composer for this kind of approach. People coming from all different forms of music to just play the music as music and not as jazz as a sort of idiom. I don't play any instrument very competently. I don't know if we haven't discussed the nuts and bolts of how this record's going to be made just yet. Only in the very vaguest terms. Until we get in the studio, everything is kind of open to change.
I don't know who will go. Let me see something. B flat. That's
some very interesting musicians working on it. Henry Threadgill is doing a special arrangement of Meditations, and Vernon Reid of Living Colour is going to perform Work Song. Michael Blair and Donald Ives are doing a complex version of Percussion Discussion, which will lead into a piece where Mingus used prose called Freedom. We have a very exotic array of instruments designed and devised by the composer Harry Partch. The Partch instruments are being integrated with regular instruments, as you might call them. It's one of the first times they've been used for music outside of his compositions.
This is a little piece entitled, "Oh Lord, don't drop that atomic bomb on me."
Charlie Watts and Keith Richards of the Rolling Stones will be doing a favourite of mine, "Don't Drop That Atomic Bomb on Me."
I mean, he's probably the most rock and roll of all those people. If he hated it, it's a great sort of contradiction. I mean, to me, there's rock and roll. When you talk about Little Richard, you're talking about something that is
phenomenal.
That's as great as any jazz, I think.
The recording studio is actually on the site of the old Astoria film studios, where great films were made in the 30s and 40s with people like the Marx Brothers and even Valentino. And now we're going to do this Charles Mingus music there. I think a lot of Mingus music is almost like music for a film, only we don't know what film it is.
There's a mythical New York, which is they try to capture in movies and it's sort of conjured up in still photographs of jazz musicians of a certain period of time. But I'm not sure that you can make music by looking at black and white photographs. I wouldn't know everything about his life, but the details of his life I do know. I think it's sort of shocking the lack of appreciation that he suffered from in his own life, given the status of composer that I would say it was.
In the 50s, he worked in the workshop form, which was an incredibly adventurous and volatile form of working. Over the years, Mingus developed an extraordinary group of musicians, people such as Jimmy Knepper, John Handy, Eric Dolphy, Roland Kirk, Jackie Bayard, and Mingus's lasting associate, the drummer Danny Richmond.
Danny Richmond I would not play without him. It would take a long time to replace him. Most people some musicians don't even understand what we have together.
Working with Charles was for me an education musically and also concerning life itself. Once we went by Bethlehem Records to do a contract deal, and Mingus is telling this the guy in charge that the money should be this amount, and before he was going to do the record, he would have to have half of it. And in the meantime, while he's talking, I'm supposed to take out my knife and clean my fingernails and just kind of glance at him, to let him know that I'm there and I think he should do what Mr. Mingus is saying. And when he finally says, "That's the way I want it," and he said, "Don't you think that's the way it should be, Danny?" I just nodded my head, yes.
Mingus with Danny Richmond, it was a 13-piece band. It was the second time I went to Birdland before they shut it down.
The real story is that he wormed his way in with Danny
Yes.
Richmond. And Danny Richmond recognised him at the airport to introduce him to Charlie Mingus, and that's why I'm here. Yeah, I mean, the thing is, this track that we've just done, really, you're trying to recreate, I think, what was probably, half the band had ordered cabs and ready to leave, raincoats and their pork pie hats on, and Mingus sat down at the piano and started this thing off. And it sounds like everybody just sort of slowly cancelled that cab, or if they could afford it, they'd say, hoard that cab. But they all sort of waltzed back in and joined in. It doesn't sound like a planned thing to me. It sounds like, they'd done a couple of tracks with him playing bass and his fingers were sore, so he sat down at the piano and they just came out with Don't Drop That Atomic Bomb on Me, which is a very fair sentiment. Don't drop it on me either, baby.
He always played that sort of almost mad music. His music was very logical, but he was a sort of an edge player, It was almost a cacophony, wouldn't it? His stuff. Well, it's nearly mad. He was very early free jazz, it was. The people he used in his band were, Eric Dolphy, for example. All of them. Teddy Curzon. They're all very early free players, and he played very free, even for the late 50s, early 60s. Depth. It's not a depth. He was like the hippest thing when I was a kid to listen to. Didn't know what the fuck you were listening to, but it's like, and it is great, Better Get It In Your Size, a classic record.
True.
Pork Pie Hat is one of the great, beautiful ballads.
That's why I said that about the raincoat and the pork pie.
Yeah. Charles Mingus is to us
Two brushes, blues and roots and blues. To me, that's what I know about Charlie. Don't let him drop that bomb on me. Bosendorfer clanging.
Charles Mingus grew up in Los Angeles His early experience included work with, among others, Lee Young, Louis Armstrong, and Lionel Hampton. Beginning in the early 1950s, Mr. Mingus added to his national reputation through his work with Red Norval, Billy Taylor, Charlie Parker, Bud Powell, and Art Tatum.
I first met Charles in the early 1950s. I was doing a series of radio broadcasts from Storyville, a club in Boston. He came in with the Red Norval Trio. He was a sideman, but he filled the room all by himself. And he was an extraordinary bass player even then.
He was my husband. He was a musician. I thought he was good. I really liked to hear him play. And he wrote music. I had babies. I cooked. Musicians came in, rehearsed, and music grew. Well, he had told me once that, you understand that one woman is never enough for me. And I said, oh, yes, I understand that. I can live with that. And I don't even remember when I first learned about Sue.
I met Charles in a club in the Five Spot Cafe in 1964 during a period when jazz was really at its apex. I didn't know that he was the person I'd come to hear perform. I just saw this large man, so centered. It was almost like a meditative trance.
First time I ever laid eyes on Mingus, he was playing at a almost empty jazz club in Detroit called the Minor Key. And Mingus was there with his bass and his eyes. Now, these eyes of Mingus were, they were like reflective pools of his heart, of his emotions. They could not help but register whatever it was that he was feeling.
It was thrilling to watch, it was thrilling to be in the audience, and certainly the musicians performed in ways that hasn't been heard before or since. And he did everything to get the kind of music he wanted. He cajoled, he threatened, he hurled insults, he fired people and hired them back 10 minutes later. He used any method, any technique that he could to get results.
Or each time someone changed in his band, he would hear how they would play, and he would learn from that and utilize their favorite lick or whatever in some of his music. So he was like Duke Ellington in that respect. He felt very close to Eric Dolphy. You know, all of Mingus's music, one way or another, was speech. It was like a singing horn or a singing bass. There is literal conversation between Mingus and Dolphy.
My father had this tremendous musical and friendship relationship with Eric Dolphy, and he had died, I guess, 9 days prior to when I was born. And he felt that the best way to remember Eric would be to name me Eric Dolphy Mingus. There are colleges that teach my father's music, and they look at it in the clinical sense. I look at it in the sense that my father had a bunch of red wine sitting at the piano with no pants on, playing this tune, and it's very emotional.
Rolling, outpouring of unpredictable time sequences and stories and combinations of instruments.
It's all coming out very consistent. Even a semi-rock and roll piece we did yesterday, we turned Gunslinging Bird, which I think was originally called If Bird Was a Gunslinger, There Would Be a Lot of Dead Copycats.
So far, so good? Okay, now, Joseph, I'm going to go over here to these cowbells, huh? That's mounted on my... Yeah. Okay.
The way the instruments worked in, it's all got the same sound to it. We come in with an idea and usually it just takes a right-hand turn, because it's really I don't know if you're picking it up, how we've set up an environment here, just a situation that everyone just falls into. It's been a totally comfortable thing with the artists and the musicians. I mean, they're wonderful. I mean, they're very open. And the musicians have been free to express anything they have in their head.
Okay, now!
Hopefully by the end of it, if you aren't familiar with Mingus's music, you'll definitely go check it out. And hopefully his spirit will be there.
When he first told me about it, and I listened to the track, you know, like this is one of those songs that, for this particular album that, you know, an A&M executive or a record executive could pick up and go, wow, we can actually put this on the ear. You know what I mean? This, somebody may be able to dance to this music.
We'll start at a certain point that everyone can relate to. That's just, it's got new, the old, and then you'll experience Mingus's music done every way.
It's wonderful to have people come and play the music and hear it in a completely brand new way. There are things on that record that just knock me out. They're so unusual and so different.
Work song was my first choice for Vernon, so I was very happy he went for it. And then you can see he's been living with it for 2 weeks now, or a week, and I've been telling him about the musicians, how it's going, and all that. And so once again, with all the questions and him asking me how we're going to do it, whatever, you saw he walked in, felt the room, met all the musicians, they talked, and he just went. You know, he has a direction.
That's crucial.
Yeah. Well, we can make a sound right there.
Yeah.
We got a sound.
Well, I think the music is there to be interpreted and reinterpreted from generation to generation according to how musicians are feeling and exploring and developing their own musical selves.
Okay. You can stop.
So basically, the idea of what I would like to try and do with the song is I want to try and do it in one pass. See, Mingus, he would just like have the musicians in his apartment, and he would go over the parts over and over again. And originally, he didn't have written music for a long time. You know, he would just have people like Jimmy Knepper or whoever in the apartment, or like Dolphin, and they go over the parts over and over and over again. He knew that what he was doing was great art. He wasn't like naive. You hear it in his music. I mean, there's great beauty, and in a lot of ways, it's the one way they could show their love for the world, even though the world at that time was not appreciating them, was not loving them back. And that schism was very, I can only imagine, was very, very difficult.
Let's work, let's work, let's work, let's work, let's work.
when he performed in public with the Jazz Workshop, he would still be rehearsing or still be working things out. Except he made a point most of the time in not presenting the musicians with scores. He would rather sing the parts to them so that they could absorb it that way. The other thing you see in the Jazz Workshop, and sometimes even in live performances, is he would sometimes stop a musician in a solo and say, "Come on, stop playing those licks, those old licks. Be yourself." But some of the musicians told me through the years that although it was irksome to go through that sometimes, they, in retrospect, were grateful because they did learn more about how to stretch, how to put more of themselves into the music because he was there saying, "Do that."
Don't see that often in people, like to see somebody so outly emotional, like if he tells you he's going to kill you and everything. Most people say, "Boy, whew, this guy, you know, I never want to see this guy again." But after a while, I mean, I want to play his music, so I put up with it. His view of music was very spiritual. Plus, it was fun, which is something that people these days, I think, lose sight of. That music should be fun.
Mingus, I will say, developed a lot of very important sidemen who I think would have made it anyway, but probably learned a lot more about themselves because they worked with Mingus and were challenged by him.
He was completely open emotionally with everything he did. I mean, one minute he would be threatening your life, the next minute he would have his arm around you, taking you to dinner. And his music shows that too. It was constantly something new, looking out for new avenues of expression, for new techniques. One thing he always did, I noticed when somebody left the band, he would always say, "Well, he didn't play shit the whole time he was there. He didn't play nothing." And if he said that about a guy, then you knew that he really missed him.
The man he had who was, I think, the most accomplished, original, was Jimmy Knepper.
Probably the best trombone soloist alive.
It's not so much that he was identified with Mingus musically, and he was only with him a year, but the punch in the mouth was part of folklore.
What had happened was the people that promoted the concert, which was recorded on a record, Mingus at Town Hall, called Mingus up and said, "Can you do the concert like a month or two before originally planned?" And I guess he said, "Well, yeah, sure," without realizing the extent of the copy work that Jimmy Knepper had to do.
I think Charles was in one of his moods, and Jimmy didn't play something he wanted. I forget what it was.
And as Danny Richmond told it, he knocked him over 6 rows of seats.
Well, it broke his jaw, I think, and he couldn't play for a while.
You hear it in the music of so many people that are troubled people. The music is, you know, just another part of them.
Charles was so complex, so subject to moods. I think he was prone to periods of clinical depression.
Charles was an insomniac. He just could not sleep.
I don't know the story about that. I know one story that Mingus told about when he went to Bellevue. He said that, well, one of the legends is that he was, first he thought he could strike it rich by meeting up with members of the mafia, and he decided against that, so he wanted people to think he was crazy.
He wanted to get his crazy papers, so-called, so that he could get out of a contract that he had with some questionable mafia figure, because he'd heard from a lawyer that if you had crazy papers, that no contracts you signed were valid.
He wanted to go into Bellevue, and I told him how he could do that. I wasn't so sure it was a good idea.
And they said, "Oh, Mingus, no, you go home. You're okay. You don't need to be here." And he says, "Well, really, I would really like to come. And I'm tired. I've been working hard. I just got to have some peace and quiet, right? Bellevue, right?" So the guy said, "Well, Mingus, no, go home." I said, "Please, I mean, just, you know." And the guy says, "Well, okay, just go through that door." And as Mingus told it, he goes through the door. As soon as he gets through the door slammed. They threw a jack on him and said, "We got another one."
It took him quite a while to get out. He didn't realize what he was in for. He just wanted to sleep, and they yanked him out of bed at 6 in the morning along with everyone else, which is not what he had intended, and almost gave him a lobotomy. He escaped he got Nat Hentoff on the phone.
Then he called up after some days and said, "I want out of here, and they won't let me out."
I got a call from him. I don't know if I even got it from Nat Hentoff, but I learned that he was in Bellevue. I went to see him, and he was in a locked ward. And he was going crazy being in a locked ward. And his psychiatrist was a woman, and she was really something. She saw me with her feet up on the desk. She's almost masculine in her. And we talked, and I talked with her for a long time. And you know, Bellevue will not release a patient to a psychologist. They will only release a patient to a doctor, physician. She released him to me. He was a brilliant musician, but he really had difficulty in getting along with people.
The feeling about Mingus always in the violence, which I've heard about, was that it was pretty much metaphorical. That he taught that it really wasn't his intention to resort to violence, but to express his feelings of violence.
He was like a little boy. Two parts of his personality. The little boy who was always hurt and very sensitive would come out and interfere.
I never saw him be violent. And if I did see him be sort of angry or throw, yell or whatever it is, put up his dukes or hit back, it was pretty much that he'd been provoked. People picked on him.
Certainly, Charles did a number of things that are indefensible. Most of the time, they were for musical for reasons. I mean, not always, but many of the scenes were because he cared so much, and he lost his temper, lost his cool, and went out.
Jazz musicians didn't have too much choice about where they were going to play. They played rarely in concerts, and mostly they had these clubs to play, and they were playing very highbrow, very complex music with the constant rattling of, glasses.
He did not have a good business sense. He was not a businessman. And he once even proposed to me that I managed him, which I couldn't do.
See, at the time Mingus was writing his book, the book which was later to become Beneath the Underdog, he had that as a possible title, but the other title that he really wanted and knew he wouldn't be able to use, knew no white man would ever let him use, was Half Yeller Shit-Colored Nigger.
But he began to talk about his 3 or 4 year old daughter. She is a person. And I said, yes, children are people. She said, I can't believe it. I can't understand it. We sit and we talk together. She tells me what she thinks and how she feels, and she tells me her reactions. Oh, I'm just amazed. Then he said wryly to me, he said, I was never a person. But kids are person. Oh, I was never a person. Nobody ever talked to me.
Well, I just remember being central to his life, and then towards the end, it was you feel it when you're a child that my father just wasn't there like he had been before.
He was brought up by his father. He's always very alone. And he used to play around with the piano and talk to God in his loneliness. It's very touching.
He's with me every single day. Everything I do is influenced by him, and all this anger and this rage, but also the way I feel. I'm so hurt every day. Every day I have a lump in my throat and I'm on the verge of tears. But it's what my father had. It's what I inherited. But I love it at the same time. I like that I'm this sensitive, and it's a blessing. I just wish I could write music so I had an outlet for it, but I really don't.
I know he had a terrible time, for 3 years or so in the 60s, the late 60s, I think, living here on the Lower East Side, broke, not playing, depending on an interesting combination of local people who didn't know who he was but were kind to him.
Look, we all have emotional problems. You got them, I got them, they got them. Now sometimes they are severe enough to interfere with living, and sometimes there's no help for them because they're isolated. But we all got them.
It's funny, he said when it was all over that now that he'd been weighed down, he really appreciated being up again.
He wasn't crazy. It's as simple as that. He was not crazy.
What was he? Weren't the main thing. He was a genius. Simple. Very simple. Huh.
My country is the sweet land of slavery. You probably remember the FBI, but I'm all for it. I always want,
A great artist is naturally a center of attention. If his art is strong enough, people notice him, and they notice his lifestyle. And if he lives his lifestyle in a certain way, people will take that as politics.
Friends or enemies, I have no idea.
When Mingus was talking about civil rights and fables of Faubus and all this in the 50s, and even up until the mid-70s, the fact that a black man at that time was saying anything against the white power structure, he was considered a radical or a militant.
A gun. This mule ain't from Moscow. This mule ain't from the South. This mule has some learning. Mostly mouth to mouth. This mule could be called stubborn and lazy, but in a clever sort of way, this mule could be working, waiting, and learning and planning for a sacred kind of day. The day when burning sticks and crosses is not mere child's play, but a madman in his most incandescent bloom.
So what I'm going to use is the melody
played by the bass. Well, the bass melody from the percussion discussion score, and have Greg play that as the melody. And then have Don Elias and I build a percussion duet. And then that whole piece will be an introduction to Freedom.
Okay, here comes Greg. You're going to record on track 2.
2 or 3?
Track 3. Like I said.
Like you said.
Track 3. Now.
Maybe I could, if they're okay, maybe I could do another one on top of them.
What, Michael? Yeah, that was great with Don. Maybe Greg got another try at it.
Yeah, let me just go on top of that one.
The music exists, and it is just coming through us this week. So the way we'll build Freedom is that Don Elias and I will make that first piece as the drum piece, as the intro, with Greg playing the bass melody from the percussion discussion. And then we'll go on and lay down a basic track for Freedom, using the parts instruments.
There's enough political content inherent, even when there aren't lyrics involved. There's enough political content in his music for it to have been threatening. I think the violence in the music is genuinely motivated violence, you know? That might be why, like, rock and roll musicians sort of see something in it.
Freedom fought your brothers and sisters, but no freedom for me. Stand fast, old muse, soothing contemplation, thy burning hole and aching thigh, that your stubbornness is of the living, cruel anxiety is about to die. Stand fast, young old muse, stand fast. Stand fast, young old muse, stand fast.
Eric Dolphy explained to me that there was something similar to the concentration camps once in Germany, now down south, where they separated the picketers, the green from the red, or something like that. And the only difference between the electric barbed wire is that they don't have gas chambers and hot stoves to cook us in yet. So I wrote a piece called Meditations as to how to get some wire cutters before someone else gets some guns to us.
The piece is like called Meditations, and it's got this, it's serious, it's got a serious mood to it, but it's a lot of wit. The average arranger, orchestrator would definitely not have done what Mingus did. They would have, you know what I'm saying? They would have, the pa-pa would have, an instrument that plays pa-pa would have been assigned that role. But he assigned the pa-pa to the flute. Nobody does that.
Right. And we're going to be staggering on the tuba and bass.
Right. Where it's sounded, where, so the sound where it's written right there. So you can you play the octave in there? Right. Okay, and then they're playing a little bit slow right now, but it's going to be faster. Okay.
Hi, Hal.
Oh, yeah.
So?
It's worked out. I mean, the only difference I've been finding so far is it hadn't occurred to me how difficult this music was. So I don't think we're going to get done as much stuff this week as I thought. We had like 15, 20 songs planned. And they would be interludes or full pieces. And last night we got through 3.
You know what I'm saying? Art. You see where you know, da dee da 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 dee, that part right there.
Mingus was using his bass playing as like a conductor uses the baton. He could control the band from the bass without being seen, just by the way he played the bass. He's always way on top of the beat.
Music's it's two things at once all the time. It's incredibly rooted and incredibly sophisticated at the same time.
band also has all those elements. I mean, Don Elias is a very rooted earthy percussionist. I found out last night he played on the Corner, did all the percussion on that.
Go ahead, do it, man. And don't worry, none of us are going to be listening. Don't worry.
I felt that Henry really got into that whole mindset of Mingus's world without doing the same thing that he did.
There is the idea that you're really using the studio as a big laboratory. You know, that the only real way to approach this music is to take it apart like a kid with a toy, you know, see how does this work and see whether it will go back together in a different way.
Charles wrote some pieces, meditation, Fables of Faubus, etc. There were sections in his other works that had to do with what was happening to blacks down south, and for that matter up north. But as time went on, he went on to say that it's deeper than color. That the real problem in this society, which has something to do with generating prejudice, is that most of us don't know who we are. Most of us are fragmented.
Charles, to me, was one of the most fiercely honest individuals that I've ever met in my life. Utterly creative and imaginative and open and full of courage.
I still miss him, and I think there is a lot more that he would have done, and music would be much different today if he were alive.
Charles had been losing strength in his muscles, and he felt it first in his bass playing. And eventually this turned out to be a nerve disease called amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, or Lou Gehrig's disease.
Mingus tried with great courage to fight this disease in a quite physical way, to continue to play and continue to convey musical ideas when he was really at his very last.
The next to the last time I saw him, when he couldn't move out of his chair at his home, he had just completed a string quartet. And that was the first one of those I think he'd ever done. And there was always a sense there never was an ending.
By the time we found out what he actually had at the Neurological Center in New York, they said he had 3 to 6 months to live. It was that swift.
I think they investigated every conceivable cure. Straight advanced medical, experimental, everything.
At the White House, at the 25th anniversary of the Newport Jazz Festival, which was being celebrated during Jimmy Carter's administration. About 500 musicians went to celebrate their music. Charles went in his wheelchair.
Charlie Mingus. Come on, Mingus, stand up, will you?
And we ran into Jerry Mulligan. He'd run into a friend of his in Mexico who he said had Charles's disease and was being cured by a witch by the name of Pachita. So 3 days later, we were on a plane to Mexico and spent he actually lived a year rather than 3 to 6 months.
Back in 1979, I had just come back from visiting my father in Cuernavaca, Mexico. My sister and I are upstairs chatting, and the phone rang, and all of a sudden my sister and I just looked at each other right in the eyes and just like, we knew. And our father died. Bring out the feelings inside me. There are so many memories, so much pain and love in me. I was lost in your genius, still lost in your genius.
Charles's death was a relief. It was a freeing of his spirit that had been trapped in this incredible way, like a beached whale. I mean, this huge spirit which he never lost.
I love him. And I don't put it in the past tense. Yeah. There's no reason to put it in the past tense. If you can conjure him, if you can listen to his music, if you can imagine what he might say in a given situation, in his rhythms.
Actually, I went up to him in a bar once, right before a show. It was the Carnegie Hall bar downstairs. I just sort of went up and he just looked at me, and when his eyes met mine, I kind of went back and just put out my hand and shook it. That was about a year after that. I think he passed away when I was like 21, 22, just shortly after that.
And then I took his ashes to India and scattered them in the Ganges River, which is what he wanted. I think he wanted a peaceful, far away from New York jazz funeral departure.
I mean, with everyone talking about it, I think which direction to go will come out.
Yeah. I mean, an awful lot of talking about it, you know.
I mean, it's been working out really well. I mean,
it might, you know, it'd be better maybe just to play as well. And the instruments will be set up by now then.
Yeah,
the
they're
clash
waiting
instruments.
for us.
So they're going to have a big. They're bound to have a big influence, even if you end up kind of limiting the use of them. I mean, they've got to colour the mood just by their presence.
This is Joe. Elvis.
Hi.
Hi.
Nice How you doing? How you doing?
Where is everybody? Are they doing anything? Ah, well. Hey. Figure it out.
If you sing the melody, it will work against it. You know, with nightmare. If somebody else sing the melody, I'll sing it.
You haunt my every dream with nightmare. Tell me what's your scheme? Can it be that you're of a lonely, broken heart? Why must you torment me with nightmares, pain and misery in a heart that's loved and lost? Take away the grief you've caused. Can't sleep at night. Twist, turn in fright with the fear that I'll live it all again in my dreams. You're there to haunt me when you say she doesn't want me. I've been hurt. Do you know what that means? Weird nightmare. Take away this dream you born. Weird nightmare. Mend a heart that's torn, that has paid the price of love 1,000-fold. Bring me a love with a heart of gold. With
Yeah, but I got the whole, I mean, I got all the music, but we can't do all the music.
Oh, good to see you. Yeah, take care. It was beautiful.
I'm so glad we got this.
Oh, you sounded beautiful. Wonderful.
The general mood.
I'm off.
It was a pleasure, man.
It's a pleasure to meet you.
Hey,
It's
it's
very,
a pleasure meeting you
I'm a
and
very big
working
admirer
with
of you.
I'm a big admirer of you.
Hear me, this is embarrassing. Good luck. Enjoy yourself. Yeah.
We can work together.
How weird is that nightmare?
I'll tell you.
A quick story about Mingus and the Blues. We were standing at a bar at the Five Spot one night, and he was talking about the blues. And he had the bass in his hand. He was about to go on stand. And a guy came over who had been standing at the bar, a big guy, a very black man, who said, "You have no right to talk about the blues. You can't play the blues. You're not black enough to play the blues." And Mingus lays down his bass, and I figured, uh-oh, we're going to have one of those 1, 2, 3 fights. And then Mingus thought better of it, and he picked up his bass and played some of the deepest blues I've ever heard. And the other guy, it was like a movie, just slunk away.
Charles comes out of the blues. Charles is blues. That was his soul. His soul was in the blues.
His music made it. What he's able to do with music, how he feels and how he expresses himself. I always felt that Charlie had great feelings within himself, which he expressed in music.
I think he felt an enormous admiration for Ellington. Ellington was, I think, his. If you had to gauge influences, although Bird and some of the early boppers were influences, I think Ellington was by far the biggest influence. He may have felt some rivalry. I think Mingus was that kind of person.
Well, this picture, I remember this concert because it's at Carnegie Hall, and that's the first time I ever realized my father was famous. I never really realized it before this one. It just, we went to this concert at Carnegie Hall, and there's all these people, and they're clapping for my father, and I couldn't get over it. It just blew me away. And he's always your dad. And then all of a sudden, all these people really admire his music, and then that's when I realized that he was something more than just this great dad,
He was larger than life, and he was right there living in the moment.
When I walk down the street and I hear taxis, subway, people shouting in the street, I'm always reminded of Mingus because that was so much a part of his music. And I think of him and I still miss him.
Weird nightmare, you haunt my every dream. Weird nightmare, tell me what's your scheme. Can it be that you're a part of a lonely, broken heart? Weird nightmare.
My name is Jack Walrath, and I'm here to announce the next tune we are going to play. This is a tune that illustrates the fact that Charles Mingus was very much like Alfred Hitchcock. Also, not only in terms of they had basically the same profile, but you never knew what was going to come next. And this tune, which is dedicated to his beautiful child bride, his last wife, Susan Mingus, who is responsible for the Mingus dynasty and is indeed probably the person most responsible for putting Charles Mingus where he is today. And this tune was named after her, and it was based on her change of moods, and it very profoundly illustrates Mingus's change of moods. This is called Sue's Changes.